Welcome to Biztech Technology Show, the show where we feature tech companies operating across Asia, talking about their solutions and how they make a difference to their customers' businesses. Today, we speak to Tom Simpson. He's the Senior Vice President APAC at AdColony. AdColony is one of the largest mobile advertising platforms in the world, with a reach of more than 1.5 billion users globally. Now, Tom, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to be here.
Now, Tom, could you give us an overview of AdColony and its history?
Yeah, sure. So, as you've already said, AdColony is one of the largest global mobile advertising platforms. We specialize in in-app advertising. And because of the nature of consumer behavior, when you're talking about in-app advertising, you're talking about one of two things. You're either talking about social media. Everybody spends tons of time on Facebook if you're older, or TikTok if you're Gen Z. These days. So it's either, within social media, or the other thing that consumers spend tons of time doing on their phones is playing mobile games. And consumers spend almost as much time playing mobile games on their phones as they spend with social media. So AdColony really specializes in advertising within mobile gaming apps. We've recently been acquired by Digital Turbine, who are a NASDAQ business, really exciting business. So they bought us and a couple of other tech platforms which are complementary to their main business. So that gives us an array of new tools that we can use to help drive outcomes for our clients.
Okay, could you give me a perspective? And I was going to ask you about that later in the conversation, but that changes things dramatically for you in terms of product and service offerings that you can offer brands and agencies. Could you walk us through some of the offerings that you would be able to then provide them?
Yeah, okay. So, AdColony is a standalone business. As I said, we specialize in advertising within mobile games, and most advertising within mobile games is something called rewarded advertising. So the mechanic for that is a consumer is playing a game, they run out of lives, or they want to get some more points, or whatever it is within the game, and they're offered the choice. Either you can pay to get 3 more lives or more points, whatever it is that you want, or you can watch a video and you can get that thing that you need for free, sponsored by a brand, because you're watching a video. So consumers actually really like this format because they have a choice. They don't have to watch the video. It's not like on YouTube or something like that. We just get a video pushed to us. We don't have a choice. We have to watch it before we get the thing we want, which is the content. But rewarded advertising enables a much more kind of transparent conversation with the user. So consumers like that. So that's the AdColony core product, is mobile gaming rewarded video. What the Digital Turbine acquisition does is it adds loads of other products at different stages in the consumer journey. So Digital Turbine as a business, their core model is pre-install. So getting apps pre-installed on mobile handsets. So they work with mobile handset manufacturers and telcos, and depending in which market you're in order to get a pre-install on a handset, it can be important to have a relationship with the handset manufacturer like Samsung or Huawei, or it could be important to have a relationship with the telco. It's very different by market and by region, but both of those guys are important. So the core Digital Turbine model is Netflix wants to get their app pre-installed on every Samsung handset in Singapore. Digital Turbine can make that happen with the relationships that they've got, right? So that's the core Digital Turbine model. We've also added some more supply side technology in fiber, so some different ways of getting inventory for mobile video, so some slightly different techniques to rewarded advertising, and then a platform called Appreciate, which marketers can actually use to run their own advertising now, so making it much more like a kind of a self-serve Facebook or Google model. Previously, buying advertising from AdColony or Fiber or Digital Turbine was a bit more complex, a bit more of a kind of a managed service. You give us the money, we run it for you, guarantee the outcomes. Now with Appreciate, you've got your own fingers on the dashboard and you can do it yourself. So
it's more of a, so it's shifted from towards more of a self-service type model with this with this operating go-to-market strategy?
Bit more self-service, just more products at different stages in the consumer cycle. But I think the other key thing is creating that flywheel effect with all of those products at different stages of the consumer journey. But the crucial part of the flywheel is adding in the data. And if you think of all the exciting data that Digital Turbine has access to, with AdColony having its SDK across most of the largest mobile gaming apps globally, add that to Fiber's footprint, which is across mobile gaming apps, but also a ton of other stuff, including OTT and video apps, the data visibility that Appreciate has from the dashboard, and then Digital Turbine's data assets with its route access to mobile phones through handsets, and then telco data tie-ups. So really, really incredible data assets sitting at the beginning, at the middle of that flywheel. So just kind of spinning consumer app install, and yeah, exciting.
And that sounds really fascinating. So this will then considerably help your engagement with brands and agencies. Yeah,
I mean, I think at the moment, I mean, it's no secret 80 to 90% of advertising budget in the digital space goes to Google or Facebook, right? Yes. And it goes to them for a lot of the reasons that I've talked about. People like having fingers on dashboards and doing things themselves. They like the kind of self-service model. And the other key thing that Google and Facebook have got is products that sit across all stages of the consumer lifestyle, but also driven by that data. Facebook and Google fundamentally, like most Web 2 platform businesses, really their data businesses. That's what they do. That's what their product is collecting data on us and then monetizing it via advertising. So Digital Turbine is seeking to create an independent third-party alternative to Facebook or Google with that kind of, cohesive walled garden flywheel in the mobile app space specifically.
Okay, that's very interesting, but maybe could we take a little bit of a macro look and share with the audience here in terms of how ad spend has shifted over the last decade, just overall ad spend, and also where the seismic shifts have occurred and are going to occur?
Okay, I mean, depending on the market that you're sitting in, 10 years might not be far enough to go back. I mean, if you're looking at maybe the US or Western markets, then we're already at, digital advertising maturity maybe 10 years ago, where we see more than 50% of spend going into digital advertising. But yeah, so the big trend has been that shift from traditional advertising channels like TV, radio, out-of-home newspapers into new advertising channels, social media, connected TV, apps, whatever it is, and new formats, display formats, video formats, rich media formats, interactive formats. So it's that big shift from traditional to digital. I mean, if you look now, US, Europe, Australia, we're now at 70% of digital spend sitting within digital advertising. And even 10 years ago, as I said.
How about APAC?
How about APAC? Yeah. So, I mean, really dependent on market, actually. And when I look at APAC, I divide it up into four different regions. So ANZ looks very similar to the US and Europe, and you've got around 70% of digital advertising spend. 70% of cash going into digital advertising, and a high level of maturity in the market. Southeast Asia and India, you're looking at 20 to 30% of spend going into digital advertising. So
there's a huge runway ahead in terms of growth.
Massive runway. Southeast Asia and India, massive runway. Most Southeast Asian markets are sitting around 30% at the moment. India is further back at maybe 20 something percent. So huge growth.
And Tom, can I ask you, because you're a veteran in this industry, why is that the case? Because in the tech cycles, the difference between the West and China and say Southeast Asia is very small. But in terms of ad spend, this is a big disconnect. Why is that? Is it because consumers are still responding to traditional advertising?
There are a few things that sit underneath that. I think the first thing is, entrenched kind of belief in TV advertising, especially. So huge belief from marketers in TV advertising as an effective and cost-efficient way of reaching consumers at scale. And to be fair, that is still the case here in Southeast Asia and India. TV is still your absolute mass reach medium if you want to hit entire families, and still reasonable cost. If you look at the conditions of maybe the US, TV is a much higher cost, much more premium model. So TV still really works in these markets in a way that maybe it doesn't in other markets. I think the second part of it is slower digital maturity around digital services. So in Southeast Asia and India, consumers spend more time on their mobile phones perhaps than in the US or whatever. So huge mobile usage, but the spend isn't there yet in a digital space. E-commerce lags behind where it has been in the West. Digital payment services lag behind where they've been in the West. And that points at other structural issues, like so much of Southeast Asia and India is unbanked, right? So how do you have digital payments when you're unbanked? And companies like Grab and the super apps are starting to address those problems in lots of interesting ways. So this is really changing fast. But if you look over the past 5 years, the payment there in the digital sphere hasn't been there. So advertisers haven't been able to see the outcomes. If you're an advertiser in the US, you spend a lot of money online and you can track, I spent this money on an ad campaign, and then I can track the conversion through to Amazon. Yes. Because so much money goes into Amazon. And there's a thread that you can pull through. Here in Southeast Asia and India, it's messier, that e-commerce isn't there yet, blah, blah, blah. So less easy to see the outcome of your digital spend, so less of a pull in. Marketers get really addicted to performance advertising when they can see the outcome.
But okay, and that's a good point, because so gaming is a huge industry. You're right in the middle of that. It's bigger than Hollywood. It's bigger than music. Could you give us a perspective of the Asia Pacific region and the sort of opportunities that you see for AdColony? Okay.
So, gaming globally, massive business, as you said. Gaming monetization twice as big, in fact, as Hollywood and the music industry together. So massive business. I think most marketers, many people in tech don't understand kind of what a beast gaming is. And Asia is really the home of the gaming market.
Yeah, we are 200, I think Southeast Asia is something like, so we have 400 million gamers, but out of that, 280 million are mobile gamers. Because it's accessibility, it's not console business, it's a mobile business.
Totally, and that's, differences that you see maybe in, US or Europe, you see more console and PC gamers. Here in Asia Pacific, we see a much higher proportion of mobile gamers. But overall across Asia Pacific, over a billion gamers, much higher percentage of consumers playing games, much higher percentage of consumers interacting with gaming content. So maybe watching videos of their favorite gaming influencers on YouTube, or watching streams of people gaming. And then a much higher percentage of users also interested in esports. So watching esports tournaments, participating in esports tournaments, whatever it is. So from a consumer perspective, really high demand from gaming, but also interestingly, from a supply perspective, from a tech perspective, Asia really is the home of gaming. So here at AdColony, when we look at our gaming supply globally, so the apps in which we can place our ads, more than 50% of them come from the Asia Pacific region. So the Asia Pacific region is where the supply comes from, And then, globally, yeah, of course, tons of people playing. So, I mean, and a lot of that is, so you've seen, Tencent has obviously invested massively in gaming, loads of other Chinese businesses, huge investments in, historical investments coming out of Japan and Korea in terms of gaming. And Vietnam is actually growing really quickly as a hub for gaming publishers. So from a business perspective, so much of the money and so much of the supply sits here in the region.
And Tom, how about the in-app purchases and in-app advertising and stuff like that? You talked earlier about the seismic shifts that happened in terms of spend. However, in terms of percentage, it's still smaller than Western markets because the spending by consumers is less. How are you seeing that in the gaming business specifically?
I think the key thing that we see in the gaming business is that consumers are more likely to engage with rewarded advertising, more likely to accept that offer from a brand to subsidize their gaming experience. Whereas I think, in the US or Europe, we might see more consumers prepared to pay for games up front. They're console gamers, so they're used to that experience maybe, or when they're playing mobile games, more keen to pay for lives, pay for upgrades. So I think that's the key difference.
And also that in Asia, one of the key things, especially in Southeast Asia, is the rise of the pay-to-play business model for some companies. Do you see that as something that's going to accelerate this year?
Yeah. So play to earn. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing I'd say is, I think play to earn is, I prefer play and earn, because I think play and earn is a little bit softer. I think play to earn sort of suggests that you're going to make this your career. It's not fun anymore, this is work. Play and earn kind of, I think, more represents the kind of economy that we sit in these days, a more kind of gig-related economy, flexible workers, flexible working spaces. You don't need to be in the office, you can work from home, you can make money online in lots of different ways. And that's obviously, key to the Southeast Asian economy. But yeah, so I think play and earn, play to earn is going to be a big part of the gaming landscape. Huge investments coming from, American VCs into the Web3 blockchain space, but also a lot of emerging investment and growth coming from China, big blockchain gaming scene growing up in Vietnam. So lots of development there. And I think, yeah, play to earn is a really interesting dynamic. I don't think anybody's quite cracked it yet. I mean, the most famous play to earn game is obviously Axie Infinity, which I'm sure some of the listeners will have seen. It was on the front of the Business Times a few months ago. It's a business with a multi-billion-dollar annual run rate in terms of revenue that's come from nothing. So, tons of money in there. I think the challenge is how to sustain the economy within the game after the initial rush of participants coming in and putting their money into the game. Building economies is quite complicated, and the Axie leadership, which is actually a company called Sky Mavis, I mean, they're acting like central bankers. I mean, they've got different levers to pull. How do they deflate this currency over here and push cash over there? It's really interesting.
Now, Tom, when you're talking about a macro view like that and central banks, we can't complete this conversation without a discussion on the buzzword that's right now, the Metaverse. Where do you see that heading in 2022 in the Asia Pacific region?
In 2022, nowhere. Irrelevant. Forget about it. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of hype around the Metaverse. But I think if we look at a kind of internet type timeline, then we're somewhere around, and you can track this with consumer adoption. So number of consumers spending time in the Metaverse tracks very well with where the internet was back in 1993, 94. So I think we're somewhere around 93, 94 in terms of metaverse maturity. So what did the internet look like in 1993, 94? We didn't even have Netscape Navigator yet. You had
that was 1996, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, there you go. So, we had very early browsers, GeoCities, people coming online in hyper sort of walled gardens with America Online. So really, really early days, a very restricted user experience. And that's kind of where we are with the metaverse. But I mean, that's not kind of to underplay the importance of the metaverse, in not 2022, maybe 2032. And in 2032, consumers will be spending huge amounts of time in that kind of persistent 3D virtual space that is the metaverse. I think one of the things that I see most commonly when I have metaverse discussions is this idea that the metaverse is going to be something that you view on virtual reality goggles. Maybe because Mark Zuckerberg has, been doing a lot of quarterly earnings presentations where he's had his 3D goggles on, but that's not going to be the metaverse. The experience of the majority of people in the metaverse is not going to be wearing a set of 3D goggles to go into a wholly 3D world. And I mean, I know that because I'm definitely not doing that. It's not something that I want to do. It will be enjoyable for certain things, but it's just not what I want. I don't want to be, plugged into the matrix. I have a life. I like the outside. So, the metaverse will exist across a range of different devices. So it will continue to exist across mobile screens. So consumers are already spending a lot of time in the proto-metaverse. And I think the earliest incarnation of the metaverse is really mobile games, where consumers are going, hanging out with their friends. The kids go to play Fortnite. They don't play Fortnite anymore. They just kind of hang out and chat to their mates and, maybe go to a concert.
Absolutely. My daughter does stuff like that. I completely agree.
There you go. So I think, the metaverse already kind of beginning to come into existence on mobile phones. Augmented reality will be really crucial. So we'll see it across augmented reality, smart devices, big screens. It will be a multi-screen, multi-sensory experience, a layer sitting on top of the physical atoms world.
Tom, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot from you. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience before we leave the conversation?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest questions that we get from marketers, and just kind of building on what you were talking about with the metaverse there, and the last question you asked, one of the biggest questions we get is, oh, what's the relevance of the metaverse now? Well, not a huge amount, but lots of interesting things you can do. How can we get involved? And I think, we talked a lot about gaming in this conversation, that the easiest way for marketers to start to explore and iterate within the metaverse is to look for gaming environments. As you said, it's that next generation, your daughter playing games. They're how we learn about the metaverse, and that's how we can execute within the metaverse now. And there's some easy opportunities to grab within gaming. And that's what marketers can do right now.
Tom, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Cheers for having me. It's been brilliant fun.
Now, I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Tom Simpson, the Senior Vice President APAC at AdColony on Biztech Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our various platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thanks again for tuning in.